Good afternoon, YouTube, and welcome back to Fat Cat Collections. And today I just want to talk a little bit about Microbrand watches. What are they? And, should you invest your money? Or I wouldn't say invest your money, because we all know watches. This is a hobby. Although there are, watches out there that you could flip at a later date. All that is kind of speculation. There is no guarantee that you could buy any watch out there and just expect that at a later date to sell it for more. Not regular everyday guy watches. Even a Rolex, there's no guarantee you're gonna buy a Rolex and be able to flip it years later and sell it for more. Okay, but that's a whole different topic. So Microbrand watches are basically small independent watch manufacturers who produce a very limited amount of units. So like 300 to 2,000 per year. They're much smaller. I kind of consider them like, like when you have a major brand, that would be, a major brand or a macro brand, whatever you want to call it. Basically like a mainstream brand. Like a micro brand is not going to be your Rolex. It's not going to be even your Invicta. It's not going to be your, your Omega, your Bulva. It's going to be a brand that you're typically not going to find in a big box store or in a big store, or not necessarily a big box store, but it have its own retailer. Like there are Omega stores, there are Rolex specific stores, and then there are, Invicta stores, and there are, there's probably, I assume there's probably Bulova stores and stuff like that. But basically these brands don't actually have a concrete brick and mortar showroom, at least not when they start off as a micro brand. Now there are some brands who have gotten to the point where that has happened, but it takes a very, very long time and a long time to build that company and brand recognition. Typically micro brands are more sought after from watch hobbyists and enthusiasts. So generally the average person who says, hey, I want to get a watch or I'm going to buy a watch as a gift, generally they'll go into their Macy's or their jewelry store in the mall. They'll maybe check out some websites, and basically when you just Google watches, you're not really going to come up with any micro brands. You're going to have to really hunt for them. I've reached out to a lot of micro brands over the last couple years, and I've discovered a lot of really cool brands that I normally wouldn't have found. Some of these brands I had to really dig and just kind of stumble onto them, whether that be through watch forums, through a Facebook post, or really digging through specific keywords on Google and YouTube. So some of the micro brands, just as an example for you guys to check out, and I've done video reviews on these, such as Visser watches. They're a fantastic micro brand company, which is kind of interesting because Visser is not actually, they actually are a big brand under the fishing reel market. That's where they started off, and they're a huge, well-known fishing reel company called Vostal, and they have several other labels as well. I don't know much about their products, but they're making a great micro brand watch. Another one is called Aquadive. They've been around for a really long time, but you probably never heard of them, unless you're into the watch community and you're kind of a watch enthusiast or a hobbyist like myself. Brands like Neymar, stuff like this. Neymar, this is the Tudor Homage watch they sent me. Beautiful watch, great price. And you're gonna, Delta T, how could I forget Delta T, another micro brand watch company. And so generally these micro brand watch companies, they're making their pieces limited editions, they're calling them, a lot of them, where they'll make 100 or 1,000 units, just depends on the company. And you can either, what I've read about micro brands as well, is that you can either get a really great watch made in some cases the same factories as some of the mainstream brands with just as good quality for a lot less. And on the flip side to that, you can also get a watch that's a micro brand and pay a lot more. I've seen micro brands that have been exceptional deals, powered with really very high-end, nice, I shouldn't say high-end because that's very debatable, but very well-known movements, Seiko NH35 and 6s, Miyota movements, well-known automatic movements that are respected, very decent quality movements without, getting involved in the whole world of horology and what, makes a movement work, and that I believe there's kind of two sides to, watches or horology. There's entry level where you wear it, you enjoy it, you like it. There's guys who are, I'm not going to say snob, we have those too, but the ones who are really interested in how it's produced and what went into making it, and whether it's hand assembled or machine assembled. All these are debatable for quality, and of course everybody likes them different based on these factors. So generally a lot of micro brands, they don't use in-house movements naturally, like a lot of mainstream brands also, like Invicta for instance they don't have their own movements, at least not in today's day and age. They use a lot of movements by Ronda, which is a quartz Swiss-made quartz movement, and that, of course, will be debatable because a lot of folks think that if it's not made in Switzerland, then it's not Swiss, but they fall underneath the Swiss-made stipulations for being called Swiss. Some are Swiss parts movements. It's really, I mean, it's a whole different video to discuss that or argue that. But then you have like Miyota, which are Japanese, Seiko, same thing. Those movements are just, movements that are found in a lot of the mainstream brand watches. So very common one that I've seen with Microbrands are going to be your Miyota and and I've seen some ETA or ETAs. It just really depends on the brand. Other brands such as like Alexander, which I've reviewed before, I've been working with them for a while now, make a higher end, approaching, I would say, luxury priced watch. If you haven't checked their watches out, they're really nice quality. They use a lot of Valjoux 7750 movements in their watches. And they're actually what you might consider a micro-brand, but they're actually owned by Sterling. So that's kind of Sterling's sister company or baby company. I'm not really sure what you'd actually call it, but they are owned by Sterling. So there's lots of different companies out there who are, like Invicta owns, I think, Glycine, I think it's called. I haven't really done a lot of research on them. But there's lots of companies, just like, Movado just bought Movement, so you're going to have a lot of times some of these micro-brand companies come out and start producing units or watches on a small scale, and based on popularity, they might get purchased. And then become, like Movement is not a micro-brand anymore. Movement is actually a mainstream, watch. I mean, you hear about them everywhere. They're all over the internet. So as time goes on, I'm sure you're going to start to see, if they're not already there, Movement in big box brick and mortar stores. And like when you have a company like Delta T, I think they make a great product. So I've been really impressed with some micro-brand companies, and other ones not so much. And you really have to just be a smart shopper and really do some research on the watch. I mean, for me, when I'm looking at something that isn't super unique, and I don't want to go out and bash on any particular brand because I like all the watches, but when you look at something that's a homage watch to a Submariner, everybody and their brother makes a watch like that. And so you really have to look at price versus what you're getting. Is it really worth it to spend, because most of the microbrands now, or I shouldn't say most, but a lot of them are funded on Kickstarter and platforms like that, where they're crowdfunded. They'll basically come up with a design. They'll get, a sample made or a mold made to produce that watch, market it on Kickstarter, and basically market it as basically getting in early, you're getting it for a lot less. And I've reviewed watches in the past that when I get them, I'm like, this is a great watch, but I wouldn't pay. So in some cases, they're half price if you get them on Kickstarter, and then you look at, after they're off Kickstarter, they're charging double the price. In a lot of cases, I wouldn't pay that for that watch, because when you look at a watch that I personally don't think is unique, like a homage watch, again, although I like it, and I wear them, there's nothing really super unique, and that's going to really come down to taste. So when you're looking for a homage watch, there are so many different options out there. It really comes down to what you like and what you find enjoyable. So you do have to be a little bit of a smart shopper, because just in my opinion, when you go looking at a homage watch to a Submariner, I'm sorry, but I think the Invicta Grand Diver or Pro Diver with the Seiko automatic movement is just as good as some of these micro brands are charging 4, 5, 6 times as much. And and I've compared a lot of these side by side. So again, without throwing out any names, they're all nice. Some of them, and some people have different things that they're I guess more they're more interested. For me, I can really care less if it has a sapphire crystal. I'm pretty careful with my watches. When I look at a sapphire crystal, or my Invictas with the Flame Fusion, or Sterling's with their what do they use? Forget what they use. Aragon uses something different. K1 crystal. I've never scratched any of my watches, and I have watches that, like some of the ones I bought when I was 19 at Walmart by Waltham for $55. I've never scratched a crystal ever. So it really depends on what you're going to be doing with it. And I mean, any of these watches have the ability to be scratched, for the most part. And it really depends on how you take care of things. So for me, I could really care less if it has sapphire, but a lot of folks, when it has sapphire, they're like, oh man, that's like the best crystal, I need to have that. So they'll rationalize the cost of why it's more. And that's okay. I'm sure it is better in some regard, but it's only better if you're gonna nick it. You know what I mean? So it really kind of comes down to what you're looking for. Me, I can really care less what the crystal's made of, as long as it's not plastic, right? Or standard glass. I mean, Again, that's personal preference. Again, I've never scratched a watch crystal ever, period. I mean, ever in my entire life. I think the only watch that I have that has a scratch in it is one that my dad gave me way back in the day. It's an old Seiko, probably from the late 80s, maybe early 80s, right? Or maybe early 80s, early or late, in the 80s sometime. And it's great. I have it in the collection. It means a lot to me to have it, but there is a scratch in that one. I'm not sure how it happened, but very few watches that I own, or that I've ever seen have a scratch in them. So again, it kind of depends on what you do for work, where you wear your watch. There might be a difference if you're going to wear a diver's watch diving, and subject it to, the elements, rather than me wearing one to work where it's not really going to be subjected to anything. So then, of course, you have, debatable parts of movements. If you have a Seiko NH35 automatic movement, and then you have a, an ETA movement or a Valjoux, is one going to outlast the other? Well, I don't really think any of us have any real way of knowing that. And, there comes down to the accuracy and that kind of stuff. But I've always said I can really kind of care, as long as it's somewhat as long as it's accurate enough where I can go a day and a couple of days if I wear that particular watch and the time's not, 20 minutes off. I don't have anything that does that. So, I don't, because I have so many watches, I rotate them. So when I wear a watch, I wear one a day, put it back in the safe, and I wear something else. And so naturally, automatic watches, I can't have a watch winder for, I don't know how many automatics I have. It's well over 40. I can't have a watch winder for 40 watches. It's just, it's not practical. So, for me, that's not really anything I'm really too concerned with. Stainless steel, for the most part, with any of these micro brand companies or mainstream companies, most companies out there are using 316L. Rolex is the only company who uses a higher grade of stainless steel, and really, for the average person, it's absolutely meaningless. Nobody's going to subject that watch to any elements where that's actually going to be beneficial in any way whatsoever. That might be beneficial if you threw your watch in the ocean and let it sit there for 20 years, but it's not beneficial to any normal person who's going to be wearing it diving, or wearing it in the hot tub, or wearing it in water, or swimming with it, or just wearing it. It makes no difference whatsoever. Again, and then there are things like the clasp, what kind of clasp. There are differences, of course, in all watches, but, and differences in finishing, of course, but I've compared a lot of different watches all the way up to some of the more expensive ones, which are, again, people could come back and be like, oh, it's not really that big markup. But, I have watches that are $2,000, $4,000 retail. And, when you compare the finishing on these watches compared to the, the Invicta Reserves, or the Invicta, even the Invicta Grand Diver that I have. Really the finishing is quite remarkable that you're getting that quality for that money. So, again, it really just comes down to what you like and what you're willing to pay for and what makes you feel good to spend your money on. And I've talked to a lot of people who have a lot of different watches in their collection, Rolex, Omegas, other high-end stuff, and, a lot of them will tell you, you might find a little bit of disappointment in buying a watch for that much money, because really, when you do start comparing it, the differences are so subtle. The differences in the finishing, the differences in the quality are so subtle, most people are never going to notice that. And what's funny, I kind of was thinking about something else the other day too, because of a video I saw, when most people see somebody wearing a Rolex, they automatically assume it's fake. Just like when, I have some watches with gemstones, some of the Aragon ones that have either spinel, or they have, topaz. When people see that, generally, and I just got my brand new Diamond Invicta, I was thinking, like, gosh, you know what? No, most people aren't really going to think these are real, And so then it comes down to the point of, like, does it really matter then if they're not real? Because, it doesn't really matter if somebody show a watch somebody and I'm like, oh yeah, these are, real diamonds. If they ask, I don't really, share it. I'm not like, look at this. But, if somebody asks, are those real diamonds? And I'm like, yeah. They don't really know, and then you can't tell by the naked eye. So I don't know, just something to think about when when you're shopping and looking at brands. I do find some micro brands out there that are exceptionally unique, and I think that's a real reason to gravitate towards a micro brand. And to just be a smart shopper with what you're buying, and really do your research. If you're not somebody who's like, hey, I don't care to drop $500 on a watch, I want it, I'm getting it in my collection, I got lots of money, I'm pretty well off, you're not really worried about it, it's not really a big deal. Well, let's face it, not everybody out there goes out and drops $500 on a watch every month. You know what I mean? So you want to get something you're really going to like and enjoy. So just be careful. I'm always here to help you in any way I can. Again, I'm not a watch expert, but I have a lot of watches in the collection. I've dealt with a lot of companies, and have some pretty good experience with a lot of these brands that have a lot of different price points. So don't hesitate to ask. I'm always here to help. And guys, let me know what you guys think about that discussion. Let me give me your 2 cents on it. And as always, guys, thank you for subscribing to the channel. Over 11,200 subscribers. Cracked 4.3 million views. That's fantastic. I was just at like 4.2 not that long ago. So thank you. Remember, if you do want to subscribe to the channel and you love watches like I do, click the like, click the subscribe, click the bell to be notified anytime I upload a new video. As always, guys, have a great evening. Bye-bye.